There was a time in my life when I truly believed that I knew God. I knew the words to all the songs. I knew the routines of church. I knew the prayers people repeated, almost like a script. I knew what was expected of me, what to say, and how to act. I knew all about God, but the truth is, I didn't really know Him. I had confused familiarity with a real relationship. I confused the repetition of religious acts with true obedience. I confused the noise in my own head with His voice. And the craziest part, I didn't even realize it was happening. I would mistake my own thoughts for God's divine direction. When I felt a sense of fear, I'd quickly say, "Oh, God warned me about that." When I wanted something really badly, I'd convince myself, "God told me this is for me." And when things didn't go my way, when doors slammed shut, when my prayers felt like they were just hitting the ceiling, I would blame God for being silent. But the truth, which was painful to admit, was that He wasn't silent at all. I just wasn't listening. I was far too busy talking, too busy trying to interpret every little thing, too busy explaining God to others instead of simply obeying Him myself. Then, one day, everything just slowed down. My life didn't fall apart. Not in a dramatic way, it just went quiet. There were no immediate answers to my prayers. No big signs from heaven. No emotional rushes during worship. No confirmation from the people around me. There was just stillness, and that stillness felt incredibly uncomfortable. You see, I had built my entire faith on movement, on feelings, on getting tangible results. I hadn't built it on pure, simple trust. In that quiet, I realized something that completely changed everything for me. There is a massive difference between God actually speaking and my own understanding, speaking for Him. And that difference matters more than we often want to admit. So, I opened my Bible, but this time, it was different. I wasn't opening it to prove I was right about something. I wasn't looking for a verse to defend a choice I'd already made. I wasn't trying to find a scripture that just agreed with my personal feelings. This time, I opened it to be and when I read it with that heart posture, it felt completely different. It didn't comfort me. First, it confronted me. A verse from Proverbs just leaped off the page and stopped me in my tracks. Do not lean on your own understanding. That was it. I stopped reading because in that moment, I realized how much of my faith had been built entirely on me, on my own logic, on my timeline, on my expectations of how God should operate. I realized how often I had been testing God. I would ask Him to prove Himself to me as if He were on trial. I'd ask Him to move faster, to hurry up and answer my prayer. I'd ask Him for signs, for some kind of supernatural confirmation. I'd demand that He explain Himself and His ways to me. I said with my mouth that I trusted Him, but my actions were screaming the complete opposite. And right then, I understood something so deeply. God is not a science experiment. He is not a genie in a bottle here to perform on demand. He is not obligated to meet my personal deadlines. He is not moved by our pressure or our frantic worrying. He moves in His time, not mine. True faith is not saying, "God, if you do this for me, then I'll finally believe." Real faith is saying, "I believe, so I will move." And that's when a story from the Gospels came flooding back to my mind. The story of the man on the mat. He was paralyzed, completely dependent, just waiting by the pool. When Jesus approached him, He didn't ask how long he'd been there. He didn't explain the biological process of the healing. He didn't give him a 5-step plan or a timeline for recovery. He simply said, "Take up your mat and walk." There was no debate, no discussion, no big emotional buildup, just a command, followed by a choice for obedience. And here, S, the part that shook me. The man S healing didn't come before he moved. It came as he was moving. The miracle was in the obedience. That hit me hard because I realized how often I wait to feel ready before I obey God. How often I wait to feel confident before I take a step of faith. How often I wait for absolute certainty before I choose to trust. But Jesus didn't say, understand it all first, and then move. He just said, move. And then I remembered something else. Something just as important. Jesus didn't just heal people physically and then leave. He often gave them a warning. He would say, go and sin no more. Why? Because healing without obedience leads you right back into bondage. God-est grace is not a permission slip to return to the very things that broke you in the first place. His mercy is not an excuse to live an unchanged life. Jesus heals us so we can walk in freedom, not so we can stay the same. Then another verse echoed in my heart, one that honestly made me stop breathing for a moment. The words of Jesus in Matthew, depart from me, I never knew you. That verse isn't spoken to people who have never heard of God. It's spoken to people who thought they knew him. People who did a lot of things for God but never actually walked with God. People who used his name but consistently ignored his voice. People who were very active in religious circles but not obedient in their hearts. That verse forced me to ask myself a very hard question. Do I truly know God? Or do I just know how to talk about him? Because knowing God isn't about titles or positions. It's not about perfect church attendance. It's not about being able to say all the right words at the right time. It's about obedience. It's about humility. It's about surrender. It, esabat, moving, when he says move. Even when it does in. T, makes sense to your logical mind. Even when it costs you something. Even when it feels deeply uncomfortable. Even when nobody around you understands your decision. And I learned this. Following every word of Scripture. Truly living it out. Doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly. It happens in seasons. It happens in his perfect timing. Not ours. Sometimes, God waits to see if we will obey him, even without fully understanding why. Sometimes, he stays silent to see if we will trust him, even without constant reassurance. And when you finally stop testing God, when you stop leaning on your own limited understanding, when you stop demanding proof, and you just start trusting him, something truly beautiful begins to happen. You stop living in fear of hearing those terrifying words, depart from me. And instead, you begin to live for the moment that every soul truly longs for. The moment when God looks at you, smiles, and says, I know you. So now, when I feel God telling me to move, even when I don't feel ready, even when I don't feel strong enough, even when I don't feel sure of the outcome, I don't argue anymore. I don't delay. I take up my mat and I walk. Thank you so much for listening. If this story resonated with you, I'd love it if you'd subscribe for more content just like this. See you in the next one.